Okay, so let's begin the class today. And today we will start with, uh, we'll continue with coal geology. And today's topic of discussion is coal petrography. That means if you look uh, into coal to a microscope, how would it look like? Okay, so let's begin. So you can see here uh, that here you can see a particular coal sample uh, in a hand specimen scale, right? So this is few centimeter by few centimeters. Okay? And what you observe here, of course, is banding, right? Beautiful banding. You can see here uh, beautiful bright colored bands, which is kind of interrupted by these dark colored bands. Okay, so these are my bright bands and these are my dark bands, right? So this is more of a banded coal that we had talked about. So the coal shown in this figure is bright banded coal or simply banded coal. It is dominated by bright shiny bands. As you can see, it's almost 90% bright band, almost 90% bright band. Okay. And these bright bands are essentially well preserved woody material. These bright bands represents well preserved woody material. Between those bright bands, there are thin dull bands. Okay? There are thin dull bands as well, and those dull bands are composed of substances such as mineral matter, mineral material. We talked about it. We otherwise call them as ash, degraded woody material, and charcoal. Okay? Degraded woody material means this woody material has been oxygenated or oxidized. This is not a well preserved woody material. So this is actually oxidized, right? Oxidized woody material. Okay? And of course, charcoal means this is burned coal. Okay. Yes. So coal of course contains charcoal as well. Yes, some coals contains lots of charcoal. There were fire in the swamps. So the swamps were, so how did this charcoal essentially form? Because the swamps where such coals were being deposited, they often catch fire, and that essentially burned the woody material to form charcoal, and they are also preserved in the coal, and that's part of the dull band. So the bright band is essentially the preserved woody material, yeah, that we have also talked about before when we were uh, discussing about coal geology. I mean, coal's maceral types. So that is the preserved woody material, and the dull band is composed of many different things. One is its mineral matter. The second one is its degraded woody material, and of course, it also contains charcoal. So now we would look into the coal under microscope. So now we are looking at it under microscope, and you can observe 3-4 types of things. Okay. So one, you can see uh, this beautiful yellowish uh, shaped elliptical shaped bodies. Okay. This is one category of stuff, and there are also smaller such fragments here and there you can observe. Then you see something which is like this long running reddish colored stuff, and this is under transmitted light microscope. Okay, this is under transmitted light microscope, like the microscope that you are exposed to in your petrology class. Okay, so these are there are red stuff, and you can see some very bright stuff. Okay, some very bright stuff, and of course there is this dull material inside. Okay, this blackish material, right? That is there. So this is a highly magnified view of a splint coal in transmitted light. The large yellow objects in the center of the image is a spore. Okay, so this is a spore pollen. Yeah, this is a spore, a reproductive cell of the coal forming vegetation, right? That is what a spore is all about. A spore or a pollen is a reproductive cell, the vegetation that essentially would form the coal. It is about 2 millimeters long, so that would give you a scale of the view. It's around 2 millimeters long. They can be quite of significant size. Okay, the spore was probably round before, yeah, like this, but then the coal was compressed. That's why you see them like a flat elliptical stuff, right? It was squeezed flat after burial. The thin red bands that run horizontally across this view are thin shreds of well-preserved woody material. So these are essentially your woody material. So they, if you look at it in a hand specimen, these would form your bright bands, right? These would form your bright bands. These are the woody material, these reddish colored stuff. Okay? These are your woody material. The tiny yellow and orange particles are smaller spores and algal debris, as I talked about. The black material is either charcoal or opaque mineral matter, okay? Either charcoal or ash that would form the dull band. The coal does not contain a lot of well-preserved wood. As you can see from here, almost 80% of this particular coal that we are seeing in this picture is, mostly mineral matter and charcoal, right? So it will not be a very nice looking, nice, bright banded coal. Okay? Instead, it is mostly charcoal and mineral debris. The material in this view is representative of coal that is formed under conditions that were not ideal for the preservation, of plant material, right? Because if the plant material would have been preserved in a better way, we would have seen more woody material present in the coal, right? Hang on for a moment. Okay. Now let us look another picture under transmitted light microscope. See how it is. Now, on the contrary to the last picture that you had seen, you see here the well preserved plant material is really present. You know, so these reddish stuff is my plant material. Okay, woody material. We could form my bright bands. Okay, and these small material inside this blackish stuff is my charcoaly or dull bands. These mineral matter stuff which forms the dull band. Okay, and this very bright shiny stuff, you know, they are perhaps, you know, some of the inorganic materials, maybe pyrite or so. Okay, so this would form a very nice, bright, shiny, good quality coal. But the other one that you have been looking at is, of course, is not a very good quality coal. Okay, just by looking at the microscope you can make that distinction. Okay, so a thin section of coal made up of almost exclusively of very well preserved woody material. Note that the thick red bands, each of these represents a twig or other preserved piece of woody material, right? This view shows only minor amounts of mineral matter and degraded plant material, which are the black stuff. The area shown in this thin section is about 2 millimeter wide. Okay? It represents the type of coal that forms under excellent condition of plant preservation. Okay? So the last picture that you had seen was not a good place where the coal was formed, but here depositional environment was really optimum. Now, if I look at this particular picture, this type of coal is called canal coal, and you know what canal coal is from your from the earlier lectures. We talked about it. It's mostly there are not very much wooden material present, but it's also not bad. It has a lot of algal material in it, right? So a lot of spore, pollens, and algal material, and these would form an excellent source rock for gas, right? So you can see beautiful spores and pollens, and then the black stuff would, of course, be your degraded material. So this is a thin section of canal coal. This type of coal is composed of large amount of spores and resins and algal materials. These type of plant debris are very resistant to decay, hence you observe them. When they are found in high concentration with charcoal and mineral matter, it suggests swampy conditions where the woody material decayed away fast and the more resistant materials accumulated. Okay, the woody material could not survive, but these things actually survived. This image represents the view of a coal that is about 4 millimeter wide. Okay? So this is another variety of coal. Now, the next coal, the coal shown in this view is called a boghead coal. We also defined what boghead coal is with respect to its depositional environment. But don't worry if you have forgotten. We will recap them once more. Okay, so boghead coal, it contains large amount of preserved algal debris which appear in this image as yellow and orange particles. Okay, these are algal debris. So they're the in the earlier one they were like more preserved, but here they are more fragmented. Okay, this type of material might accumulate on the fringe of a swamp where there is lack of wood and other coal forming plant materials. Okay, this image represents the view of a coal that was around 4 millimeter wide. Okay, now if we just put everything into context, you see we talked about this picture before. Yeah, this is where my coal preservation accommodation space lies, right? So this is like the lake that we had discussed in our previous lecture, and this lake essentially occasionally inundates the land area and then again goes back. So that is what happens. So here in the this part will never form coal because essentially the lake never deposits sediments there. But this part will form coal, this part will form coal, and this part will also form coal. This is most of the time above the ground, but there are woody material here. This is, I mean, occasionally above the ground and occasionally below the water, but you have both woody material and algal material growing here. And this is always this place is always under the ground where it is mostly algal material. Okay, now you can imagine if I get a coal which is mostly woody with a lot of bright bands in them, the coal must have come from here. Okay, if you find some woody material present and some algal material present, the coal must have come from here. And if it is only a coal which is completely filled with algal material, the coal must have come from here, right? So by looking at the coal under microscope, you can also guess about the depositional environment. Okay, so there are many factors, of course. The origin of the plant debris, the uh, so the plant material itself do vary, and because of the occasional inundation of the water from the lake to the land, different types of coal essentially gets formed. Okay, like the preservation is very low if it is not underwater, slide then pour, and of course the preservation potential increases this way. Okay, origin of plant debris grown in place, and debris transported by water and wind. So this is dominated by transported debris. This is dominated by in situ debris. Okay, this part is dominated by in situ debris. Okay, and then plant debris production. Okay, this is fast debris production. This is moderate debris production, and this is where you have slow debris production, right? This is where you essentially form your canal and boghead coal. This depositional environment, canal and boghead coal, and this is your bright banded coal environment. Okay, this is somewhere in transition. Okay. Canal and boghead coal. So these are more filled with algal material. Okay. This is another picture under microscope. Okay. So coal mostly occurred opaque under transmitted light microscope. Okay. So if you want to identify different materials under within coal itself, you should look coal under reflected light microscope. Then everything else other than the coal would look dark. Okay. But this is still a microscope. This is still a transmitted light microscope. Coal mostly occurred opaque under the transmitted light microscope, as you might expect. The red black material, yeah, that is essentially which is my vitrinite. So vitrinite rich bands are my bright bands. In the thin section is the part of the coal that appears shiny black in the hand specimen and is made of compressed wood tissues. Okay, the loop-shaped orange yellow objects are flattened large spores or plants. Okay, and then these very very bright stuff. This is your inorganic part, maybe pyrite or something. Okay, these are pyrites or something. You see, you can observe this reddish stuff, whatever is there, that is your plant material, woody material, and these are your spores and pollens. And the black stuff uh, is either ash, is the mineral matter, or the charcoal. Okay, that's how you can distinguish coal under microscope. Okay. So we go further. Okay. Now again, if we are stepping back, looking in a hand specimen. Okay. So you can see here, this is a non-banded coal or a canal coal. This is, you can see some coaly material and some non-coaly material, but proper banding is not being formed. And this is where I see beautiful bright bands. These bright bands would essentially look reddish under microscope. Okay, and these are my non-coaly band. Okay, this is Duran and this is Claren. We talked about it, what Claren, what Duran is in our previous classes. Okay, so we already talked about it, but no harm in just looking at them once more. So if we under microscope, we generally like mineral, the coal material, like the component of rock, we call them as mineral. Similarly, the component of coal, we call them as minerals. Okay, so this is vitrinite. You can see vitrinite is the woody material. So vitrinite can be wood, root, or bark. Similarly, inertinite is the charcoal or any mineral material. And then ash is sediment and mineral material. Liftinites are your leaf cuticles and spores and pollens, right? So vitrinite, inertinites are often included into ash as well. Uh, Vitrinite, inertinite, ash, and liftinites. These are the 4 types of minerals that you observe in your uh, in the coal. And I hope by now you can identify them as well, which one is what. Okay. So now we are looking at coal under reflected light microscope. So far we have been looking at coal under transmitted light microscope, but here we are looking at coal under reflected light microscope. So under the reflected light microscope, you can observe that vitrinite appears like bright yellow. Yeah, vitrinite occurs as bright yellow. So this is vitrinite. Okay. And this grayish stuff is my liptinite. Okay. Very bright whitish stuff are my inertinite. A very brightish white stuff are my inertinite. This is under reflected light microscope. Remember. So this is vitrinite. So you can see this is also vitrinite. And okay, and you know the these are my liptinites. Okay, these are my sports and pollens, and this is inertinite. Okay, these are my inorganic material. Okay, this is under reflected light microscope. Okay, so now how bright your vitrinite is, that defines your VRO. We talked about what VRO. VRO is nothing but vitrinite reflectance. Okay, how bright your vitrinite band is. Okay, under microscope. And vitrinite reflectance is used for what purposes? Can someone tell me? What vitrinite reflectance is used for? Anyone? What is it used for? Vitrinite reflectance. Aniket, can you tell me what is it used for? Vitrinite reflectance. What does it indicate? Unconformity. Vitrinite reflectance. Kidding me? No, not determining the quality of the coal. How do you know your source rock is under oil window or not? What is the parameter which is used? You guys are not studying at all. It doesn't show at all. Vitrinite reflectance is used to understand with source rock maturation. Whether a source rock is, yeah, whether his source rock is way past oil window or not. It's the same vitrinite reflectance. Really, really disappointing. Aniket, where from did you get the, I mean, unconformity from vitrinite reflectance? I mean, they have, I mean, no relation whatsoever. So, on the microscopic level, coal is made up of organic grains, which are called macerals, as we have been saying. So, coal petrographers, people who study coal under microscope, separate the macerals into maceral groups, each of which include several maceral types. The groups are liptinite, vitrinite, and inertinite. So, inertinite would include also your ash or mineral matter. So the macerals identified according to their grayness in reflected light. Okay, liptinites appear as dark gray. Vitrinites are medium to light gray, sometimes really yellowish, and inertinites are white and can be very bright. Okay, so now if you compare that with respect to your transmitted light microscope, it's exactly opposite. Okay, the liptinites are composed of hydrogen-rich hydrocarbons derived from spores, pollens, cuticles, resins, and origin in the original plant material. Vitrinites are composed of jellified wood, and inertinite groups are fusinite, most of which is fossil charcoal derived from ancient peat fires. Okay, we discussed that. Okay, now by looking at the vitrinite reflectance, you can do some coal quality study as well. So you can see that if I have higher vitrinite reflectance, that means I have high carbon weight percentage in dry mineral matter free basis as well. Okay. So if I just do some vitrinite reflectance study, I can indicate what sort of um, free carbon FC. Right? We discussed about what is FC. What is free carbon content of that coal in the dry mineral matter free basis? Okay. So if it is 2 reflectance, we can see it is almost 92% of free carbon. And it's like an asymptotic curve. Similarly, vitrinite reflectance is often used. This is vitrinite reflectance. Vitrinite reflectance is in the x-axis. It's often used to predict the volatile matter present in the rock as well. Say, for example, if it is 1.5 volatile matter, reflective index, then we say around 20% of volatile matter. Yeah. So these are empirical formulas which people have designed for. You can read about them in detail when if you read Chandra and Singh's book. It's given in fairly details. And now, any question? Do you have any question? Anyone? About the coal petrography? It would have been better if we could show you the coal petrography under microscope, but that's not possible right now. Ideally, I do it, but then you are not here. So, anyone is having any question about coal petrography? You can read about it in details in Chandra and Singh's book, of course. So the next topic I want to discuss here is about the fossils that you find in coal. Okay. And we are going to mostly discuss about the fossils that you find in Indian coals, okay? Indian Permian coal. We said that the most of the coal deposits that you find, so this is the geological time scale, the most of the coal deposits we find in Carboniferous and Permian time. Okay, so where is Carboniferous and Permian? Phanerozoic. Okay, Cambrian, Ordovician. Next one will have a better. Yeah. So here you can see. So this is Devonian, where I have first amphibians, and then I start having Carboniferous. Carboniferous has two subunits, Mississippian and Pennsylvanian, and that is where my first land plant essentially comes, and that flourishes all the way till Permian. I mean, so this is the time where you see most of the coal deposits are present in the world, and also for India, most of the coal deposits come from Permian and Carboniferous age, and that is what we call as the Gondwana coal, which is present in the eastern part of the Damodar Valley and Mahanadi Valley coal fields. Okay, we will discuss about coal disposition of India in the next class, but for the time being, remember most of the coals that we find in India are Carboniferous or Carboniferous or Permian coals, which we call as the Gondwana coal. Okay, so the fossils associated with fossils in the coal and associated rocks. So you can see this is a typical depositional environment of where coal would form. This is a swampy area, as you can see. We have big land plants, of course, but also we have bushes like horsetails. We have some angiosperms, some gymnosperms, some flies moving around. So all these things will be dyed, and then this water will be filled up, and then a small clay layer will be deposited on the top of the plant material. And you can imagine that would form eventually the coal during after burial, right? And then the basin will slowly subside, and this whole plant material would kind of go through the coalification process and form coal. So this is the environment that we are looking at. It's very like Sundarbans and all. I don't know if any one of you have gone to such swampy areas, any place where river essentially meets the ocean, and just before that, such swampy areas actually do develop. You have swamps in the Amazon, you have swamps with the Ganges, mostly associated with deltas. Okay, the typical environment for the formation of coal. Okay? So what you see here is a seed of such plants in the cross section of a coal ball. So you can see the beautiful preservation of the seed. Yeah. This is just to show you some beautiful photographs. Now, the first type of common fossils that we observe with coals, mostly with Gondwana coals, are called, the first name is called Lepidodendron. So and these are the pictures of lepidodendrons. Okay, the lepidodendron was originally assigned to a scaly trunk fossil found commonly in Carboniferous coal measures. Okay, but it now refers to the whole plant. The whole plant is called lepidodendron. So this is the trunk of the fossil, and this is where the whole plant is kind of preserved. See some varieties of lepidodendrons as well. These are the cuticles of the plant. Okay, but it is now refers to the whole plant, which has been reconstructed as an enormous tree-sized organism, okay? Big plant. Lepidodendron dominated in the Carboniferous coal swamps and is thought to have reached a height of 40 meters, all the way up to 40 meters. You don't find them in the present day. Okay, they were present those days only. You don't find any uh, living representative of them. It is not closely related to the trees of today. You don't have a representative. Instead, Lepidodendron is a lycopsid, okay, more closely related to modern day club of mosses. But nowadays, of course, mosses are not 40 meters tall, okay. So they have gone through evolution and have become very, very small, but then in those days, such plants used to be 40 meters tall. And these are some of the pictures of Lepidodendron as fossils. Okay, the next variety that you observed are called calamites. So calamites are commonly found stem fossils. Okay, it's the stem of the plant uh, of the coal measures, figure A and B. So this one and this one. These stems are reached with divided segments, some reaching 60 centimeter across and wide enough to suggest that in life the plants might have reached up to 20 meter in height. Okay? So from the size itself of the trunk, you can guess they were pretty tall, almost 20 meters. The plants that form these stems are close relative to modern horsetails. Okay, I'll show you a picture of horsetails. How do they look like? Okay, and you will recognize that plant. The leaves were arranged in circular holes. Okay, like this is the impression of a leaf. Okay, and the plants grew in the wettest area of the coal swamp, very wet area, around the lakes and river margins. Okay? And then calamites and the next. So figure A, B are the example of calamite stem cast fossils. C, annularia leaf hole, and D is the cross section through the chambered vertebraria root of Permian age. Okay, I'll explain what vertebraria is in a moment. And sphenopsids, the sphenopsids are similar in appearance to calamites, to which they are really closely related, but are thought to have much smaller plants with a range of heights. Some of the vine-like scramblers, the leaves grew on the stem of the whorls called annularia. Okay? So these are the horsetails that you often observe. They look like small bamboos. Okay, and they are the modern day equivalent of the uh, calamites. Now ferns, we had a lot of ferns in the Carboniferous Permian time. Okay. Ferns were common component of coal forming ecosystem from the Carboniferous and Permian periods, as I said. Just as many environments today. Okay, we do see ferns today as well. They vary from small shrub-sized plants to large tree ferns. Okay. Tree-sized ferns are of the order of Maratilales, common fossil in British Carboniferous coal measure, occurring in coal balls as flattened adpression fossils. Okay, and then we also had pteridosperms. These diverse groups of plants is known informally as seed ferns because their leaf fronds superficially resemble to those of true ferns. But unlike true ferns, the pteridosperms reproduce via large seeds at the base of their leaves. Okay? This group now uh, thought to be paraphyletic, meaning that includes several groups of plants that are only distantly related to each other. Okay? Plants termed pteridosperms were common in both Carboniferous and wetland ecosystem. So you don't have to remember all these things, but just remember that we had ferns and pteridosperms present also in the Permian and Carboniferous coal. Okay, but they do there is something called a subject called paleobotany. Of course, if you would have studied paleontology, there is something called paleobotany where such questions are asked, such things are taught. The reason I have put them up because these things are also asked in question in exams like NET or GATE. Okay? So that's why I have put them up. But I am not an expert of you know uh, of paleobotany, and yeah. So if you have interest, of course, you have to read them by yourself. Okay, but they are not. Uh, it doesn't mean I'm not an expert, but that doesn't mean it will not be in your exam. Okay, so unfortunate that we don't have a class for paleobotany, but then you know you want to do good in such exams. These are the things that you have to read. My idea is to expose you to this stuff, and then it's up to you to develop yourself. Okay. Now, the most important Gondwana flora, the most important Gondwana flora is called Glossopterids. Okay, and Glossopterids and Gangamopterids, you know them by. Any geology student, you say Glossopterids, they will be very happy, or this is a very familiar term to remember. How many of you have heard about Glossopterids? Let me see. Anyone? Have you heard the name Glossopterids before? Anyone? Was it mentioned in your sedimentology class or anywhere before? Can someone say? Fifth year? No, not at all. Now, third year, I don't expect, but fifth year, have you heard the term Glossopterids? Gopal? Glossopterids, Gangamopterids. Have you heard the name? Was it mentioned in any of your class? It doesn't seem like. So, as I said, so this is the most important Gondwana flora that people have described. The Glossopterids dominated the higher latitude coal swamps in the southern hemisphere during the middle and late Permian. Now you find glossopterids in Indian coal. Okay, Indian coal, if you go and spend half a day in a coal mine and collect coal samples, you will find maybe 40 samples of glossopterids found. Now they formed in the southern hemisphere. What does that mean? Where did Indian coal form? Was it in a good, nice temperate region? I mean, nice, hot and humid like it is now? No. The Permian Carboniferous coal formed the Indian coal formed. India was in a southern higher altitude. That's why such plants actually develop, and you do see their fossils present in Indian coal. Okay, so that's the implication of it. The name of the group comes from the common leaf fossil called Glossopteris. So the leaf is called Glossopteris. So how would you distinguish between Glossopteris and Gangamopteris? There is another name called Gangamopteris, which also belongs to the Glossopteris family. So Glossopteris does have a mid-rib. Okay, this is the picture of a Glossopteris. Glossopteris does have a mid-rib, but Gangamopteris, although it belongs to the same group of plants, Gangamopteris doesn't have a mid-rib. Okay, and the now if you find the leaf, you call it Glossopteris. If you find the stem of the same tree, you call it Vertebraria. The root and the stem of the Glossopteris is called Vertebraria. Okay, both of them are from the same plant, but they have different name when they are fossilized. Okay, so let me read it out for you. The name of the group comes from the common leaf fossil Glossopteris, a name which is now used for the entire reconstructed plant. Glossopteris was tree-sized and bore large tongue-shaped leaves. It looks like a tongue, which was possibly shade during the autumn and autumn at the higher latitude. So they were like they shed their leaves. Okay, in the fall they used to shed their leaves. The roots and the stems of Glossopteris are called Vertebraria, named because they look like backbone of a vertebrate. Okay, but they are not backbone. They are plant material. Okay, the Vertebraria roots were filled with air chambers, which may have been an adaptation to the boggy, waterlogged soils in which they grow. Large quantities of Glossopteris fossils were found among the remains of Captain Robert Falcon Scott and his 4 companions after British Terra Nova expedition to Antarctica, which ended in a disaster with death of all members of the expedition. Okay, so so they find the same Glossopteris fossil in Antarctica. They find Glossopteris fossil in India. They find Glossopteris fossil in Australian coal. Okay, so what does that also mean? That they were present in the southern temperate region, but they were also together, right? So the distribution of Glossopteris across the new dispersed southern continents was cited as an early evidence in support of the theory of continental drift proposed by Alfred Wegener. Okay, so this is that famous Glossopteris tree. Okay, you can see where Glossopteris you find. You find them in India. You find them in Antarctica. Find them in South Africa, South America. Okay, you find them all the southern continents: South America, India, Africa, Antarctica, Madagascar, and Australia. Okay, so and I said that they are not tropical trees. They are the trees of the higher latitudes. Okay, where there is ice, where the temperature is not very high, is very high actually. Sorry, not very high. It's cold actually. And then they are present in all the southern continents, which are at different places right now. So what does that mean? That they were together once upon a time forming Gondwana land. Hence they are called Gondwana flora. Okay, not only plants, you might find some animals present in coal. Okay. So the rich habitat provided by the coal swamps were home to a diverse array of animal life, chiefly invertebrates, arthropods. Arthropods are like the normal day worms that you find everywhere in the campus now. Yeah. Uh, and then you have trigonoturbites. This is figure A. This you can imagine how it looks like. Okay, were among the most dominant predators of the Carboniferous forest. Okay, they were the most dominant predators. Okay, this is a trace fossil. Okay, so in a sandstone you can find them. Trigonoturbites are extinct arachnids similar to the modern spiders, okay, but lacking the ability of silk webs. They cannot form the spider net. Okay. Then myriapods, okay, were also present in this coal forming terrestrial ecosystem. Millipedes, okay, this is millipedes, were among the first animals to have colonized the terrestrial environment. Okay, they came from the water and colonized in the terrestrial environment and were abundant in the detritivores, feeding on the detritivores. Okay, I mean feeding on the decomposing detritus, decomposing organic matters of the Carboniferous forests. Some Carboniferous and early Permian millipedes grew very large. One genus reached up to 3 meters. My God, think about it. These small, like worm-like feature were all as long as 3 meters. Arthropleura, Arthropleura. Okay. The other giant Paleozoic coal swamp, other giants of the Paleozoic coal swamps included the relatives of modern dragonflies. Okay, you see dragonflies everywhere now. From the genus Meganeura in the Carboniferous and Meganeuropsis in Permian. Okay, this is also a very common question from for net. Okay, so what is this dragonflies are called in Carboniferous and Permian? So Meganeura in Carboniferous and Meganeuropsis in Permian, which attain wingspans all the way up to 75 centimeters. These would have been top predators certainly in the air during maturity and probably the water during the nymph stage. Okay, and there are other descriptions around it which I am not reading it for you. Okay, so that's in a nutshell the type of fossils that you would have expected the uh, in the Carboniferous and Permian coal. And we also talked about how the coal would look like under microscope. If you have any question, please shoot. Although I'm not sure if I can answer a lot of questions around paleobotany, but then yeah, even if I can't, I will try to find the answer out. Any question, anyone? But you can of course read the book of Chandra and seeing there is a good description of the fossils present in that period is given there as well. Any question? Meenakshi, do you have any question? All right, then I will stop the class here and I will see you tomorrow. Thank you.